Hey friends, Kim from stampingimperfection.com. Thank you so much for joining me today. I have a quick video I want to share with you about a hack that I'm using to create a nice cutting mat for my die cutting machine. I've got this old Creative Memories self-healing mat, and it's been in my closet for a while, and I haven't used it in a really long time because I have bigger ones, and like the blue one you see here is actually from We Are Memory Keepers, and it is actually magnetic, so I have a magnetic ruler that I use with it, so I quite like that one. So this Creative Memories one, which I've had since the late 90s, I'm not gonna lie, it's old, is not in use. So that's like one of the very few things in my craft room that isn't being used. So I decided I would attempt to cut this down to the size of one of my cutting plates, because if you can see my cutting plate there, it's super warped, and I flip it over every time I use it. Like they tell you to flip it over, and so I'm really careful about that, and it still is warping, and it doesn't always like it, that sometimes can affect how well it cuts things. So I decided that I'm going to create a self-healing mat that fits, and hopefully it won't warp like these clear acrylic plates that you get for the machine. And I've had to replace them a couple times because eventually, after you've cut like what feels like a bazillion times with those plates, they do actually break. So you do have to replace them periodically. So I decided I would try just using something in my stash that isn't getting used for anything else. So my first attempt, I was using the metal ruler, which is magnetic, and the tiny Tim Holtz craft knife. I could not find my big craft knife anywhere, and I'm pretty sure my husband has it in his shed somewhere, although he could not find it. So I pulled out these non-stick Tim Holtz scissors, and these are the medium size ones. I use these for cutting adhesives and stuff, and I really like this pair of scissors for just that. This thing cut through that like butter. I was getting nowhere with the craft knife. It was too small. A bigger craft knife probably would have worked better. My idea was I would score it several times, and then hopefully I could just snap it. But that really wasn't working. I was really afraid of cutting myself because I'm klutzy. I'm not gonna lie. So I was shocked how well those scissors cut through that thick mat. Like, goodness gracious, it amazed me. And I did cut some paper with them afterwards, and it did not damage them. I was shocked, absolutely shocked. I was thinking a pair of tin snips would be nice, but I don't have tin snips here. And my preferred way of cutting this would have been my giant Tim Holtz Tonic guillotine trimmer, but I don't have that here with me either. So that would have worked beautifully, I'm sure, because I have used that to cut those peel and stick tiles, which I used on my craft room floor a few years ago, and that actually cut the tiles beautifully. So that would have worked. That would have been my first choice. So I basically cut this almost in half. So now I technically have two, although I do need to trim the second one down about 1/2 inch. And I was tempted to do it, but I thought before I do that and endanger my scissors again, I think I want to try it out. So I tried this out, and here I pulled out my Sizzix. I have a Sizzix fold-away Big Shot, and I quite like this. I like that it stores nicely. And you can see I'm going to use the main platform, and then I'm going to use the thin die adapter. I'm going to remove that bottom cutting plate and put that self-healing mat I just cut down, and that's cut down to 6 inches. And you can see that I did take like a file board, and I smoothed down those edges a little bit. So that self-healing mat is now going to become my bottom cutting plate. So I put my paper directly on top of it, And now I'm going to add my dies. And I pulled out a couple different dies. I pulled out a script word die from My Favorite Things, mftstamps.com, and I picked that one because it's super thin. And then I pulled out this Simon Says Merry Christmas. It's almost like a Polaroid thing, and it had a second little piece with a snowflake. So I thought, well, I'd like to see how it cuts out some of these little things and some of these intricate things. So I put that top cutting plate on, and I was shocked how well this worked. I thought I would have to mess around with the sandwich, but I did not. Like, and I had tested it out. The self-healing mat was just about, not quite, but just about the same thickness as my original cutting plate. So I was surprised about that. And you can see this tiny little letter with the little spaces. It cut out beautifully. All these little letters, the snowflake, like I was very excited about that. So now it's just a matter of wiping it off. Now this is a very old mat that's been used a ton of times. So I think I'll probably get or use one of my old paint brushes to brush the papers off that. That's one of the problems I have with the clear acrylic plates, is that once you've cut on them a bunch of times, the little papers start to get stuck in the crevices, and it's hard to actually get them out. So I also have a Gemini Junior, and I have never cut on the bottom cutting plate. So the sandwiches, and that's a top cutting plate, and I flip this over and it still warps. So I've got the bottom cutting plate, I've got the plastic shim, then there is the magnetic piece, and then the top cutting plate is my usual sandwich. So I'm going to replace the top cutting plate, or in this case, I always put it on the bottom, and then just slap the rest of the sandwich on top and see how this works in my Gemini Junior. And the Gemini Junior is really nice because it's electric and you don't have to crank it. So if you have sore hands, it didn't cut. It actually made an impression. So this just means I have to fuss with my sandwich. So when I got this Gemini Junior, it actually came with a metal shim, which I've never used, and an embossing pad, which I have used, and I like the embossing pad. I'm going to make some videos with that embossing pad. So I figured, well, maybe the metal shim is all I'm going to need, because there wasn't very much difference between the thickness of the cutting plate and that self-healing mat I just created to serve as a cutting plate. So it's sort of cut, but it didn't cut all the way through. So I could see that it had started to cut, so I decided I need a little bit more of a shim. So I pulled out a piece of cardstock, and this is cut to the same size as the plate. Basically, it's 5.5 by 8.5. It's just a half a sheet of cardstock. So I put that in with the rest of the stuff. You see, I didn't even remove it. I'm just trying to see if it cuts. And it did cut, although I really had to work to get some of these pieces out, and I was feeling like I'm going to tear these if I pull too hard. So I decided this is not the best shim. So I pulled out a piece of chipboard, and this chipboard is from the back of it's from the back of a Vicki Boutin Foundations paper pad. So, you get those big paper pads, those big 12 by 12 paper pads, and I always save these for this very reason. I always find reasons to use them, or I use them in my mini books a lot, or my art journals. I create covers with them for my art journals. So I cut this down to size. I got rid of the metal shim and the cardstock. So I've got my cutting plate, the chipboard, the plastic shim, the magnetic mat. Now I'm still going to use that self-healing mat as my cutting mat. So the blades of my dies go down toward that. And it is a little longer, so I want to make sure it's lined up correctly. And I left it longer because I just got a couple of longer plates and shims for my Gemini Junior to use these slimline dies in, because they don't they're not quite, the cutting plates aren't quite long enough for the slimline stuff. So I just bought a new set. So I figured if I left this longer, then I could use this with those as well. So I'll just need to cut a longer chipboard shim. That's all I'm going to have to do. So these came out beautifully. It cut perfectly. I just had to find the right sandwich for my machine. So I'm excited about this, and I've been using it now for a little while, and it's working beautifully. It isn't warping or bending, and I have been really happy with it. Now, since it is old, and I have used it a lot, it's not perfectly smooth, but it's going to save me some money because I'm not going to have to, when I went to buy one of those new mats that somebody came out with, they were sold out like the first day. So I put my name on a mailing list, but now I don't have to spend that money because I had this in my stash. So, I mean, if I didn't have this in my stash, I would probably spend the money on that mat because the self-healing mat is actually kind of genius. Like it's a great idea. And you can see it cuts beautifully, and so far it hasn't been warping. So I just wanted to share that little hack. So thanks for watching. Stop on my blog at stampingimperfection.com. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe while you're here. Click that bell. Have a wonderful day.